President Biden says he will announce major sanctions Friday targeting Russia. The White House says the move is in response to Russia's continued aggression against Ukraine and the death of opposition leader Alexey Navalny. CBS News chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes is following the president as he raises campaign funds in Los Angeles.
Just before jetting to L.A., the president warned Vladimir Putin a new financial crackdown is coming.
I told you we'd be announcing sanctions on Russia. We'll have a major package announced on Friday.
The move comes just 4 days after Russian authorities announced the death of famed opposition leader Alexey Navalny, who had appeared perfectly healthy in a virtual court hearing the day before. Today, Navalny's mother showed up at the gates of the Arctic penal colony where he was imprisoned. They don't give me his body, she said, and they don't even tell me where it is. Hundreds of Russians have now been arrested simply for mourning Navalny's death. Among them, a 33-year-old Russian-American woman from L.A., detained in the central Russian city of Yekaterinburg. She's facing up to 20 years in prison after donating $50 to a pro-Ukrainian group.
I am in shock.
Her ex-mother-in-law spoke to CBS News.
I'm very concerned about her physical being, about her being able to get out of the jail. It's very tough right now.
Nancy Cordes joins me now. Nancy, it's been almost 2 years since the invasion by Russia into Ukraine. How does the White House keep finding new things to sanction Russia for? They've been doing it for 2 years.
It isn't easy, John. Experts say at this point there isn't a lot of low-hanging fruit because the U.S. and its allies have already, as you point out, imposed such sweeping sanctions on every sector of the Russian economy. So while the White House says that these new sanctions come Friday are going to be focused on Russia's defense sector and the parts of the economy that fund Russia's war machine, it's hard to say right now just how much those new sanctions will sting. Now, one thing that experts say the U.S. could do that might have an impact is that the U.S. and its allies have already imposed a $60 a barrel cap on Russian oil. They say the U.S. could lower that to, say, $30 a barrel. That might sting. The U.S. could impose sanctions on more individuals in the Russian government. But you're right, the kind of major sanctions that they had at their disposal a couple of years ago, those have already been imposed and taken their toll.
For the last few weeks, of course, we've been covering the effort by the president to get Congress to pass aid for Ukraine. Is that conversation changing at all from your vantage point, either from Navalny's death or from these sanctions the president has talked about?
Certainly gives the president some new talking points, and he is definitely using his megaphone right now, especially, John, because Congress is on recess. So all of those lawmakers, particularly the Republicans who have been wary of more Ukraine funding, they're back in their home districts while the president is still at the White House hammering them. In fact, he accused them yesterday of being partially responsible for the fact that Ukraine had to pull out of a town where it was surrounded by Russians. There are now hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers that have disappeared or who might have been captured by the Russians. He argued that the reason that Ukraine had to strategically pull out of that town was because it is unclear to the Ukrainians whether they're going to be getting more money and therefore more artillery from the U.S. So he says the time to act is now, and it is certainly true, John, that the U.S. has stretched its aid dollars to Ukraine as far as it has been, as long as it has been able to. But at this point, the pressure is really on to pass more funding, and all of Europe is watching.
Nancy Cordes traveling with the president in Los Angeles. Thank you, Nancy.